provisions, contingencies, and liabilities. So these accounting standard 37. The objective of this accounting standard is to ensure that appropriate recognition criteria and measurement based are applied to provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets, and that sufficient information is disclosed in the notes of the financial statement to enable user to understand their nature, timing, and amount. The key principle established by the standard is that the provision should be recognized only when it is a liability, that is a present obligation resulting from the past events. Right. So this is a present obligation for the past event. It means what? The event is occurred or the transaction is happened in the past period, but we have to pay the amount in the current year. Okay. The standard thus aims to ensure that only genuine obligations are dealt with in financial statement, planned future expenditure, even where authorized by the board of directors or equivalent governing body, is excluded from recognition. And the key definition. So what is provision? Provision, a liability of uncertain timing or amount. So provision is what? A liability of uncertain timing or amount. किती provision आहे पण त्याचं टाइम आणि अमाउंट आपल्याला माहित नाहीये की सर्टन की आपण काय करतो की इफ वी आर गोइंग फॉर or if we are planning for something in for the future for purchasing say something luxurious watch जर आपल्याला घ्यायचं असेल तर की अराउंड आपल्याला एवढे पैसे लागू शकतात पण ऍट द टाइम ऑफ परचेस किती लागतील त्यावेळेसचा जो रेट असेल त्यानुसार किंवा जी प्राइस असेल त्यानुसार like that ki provision is a liability of uncertain timing or amount. So what is liability? Next definition is liability, present obligation as a result of past settlement in expected to result in an outflow of source की आता मला पेमेंट करायचंय त्याचं now I have to pay that liability. So it is contingent liability, a possible obligation depending on whether some uncertain future event occurs or a present obligation but payment is not probable or the amount cannot be measured reliably. See, it's a liability. Possible obligation depending upon whether some uncertain future event occurs. If suppose जर माझे मटेरियलचे प्राइस वाढले तर पण ते वाढणार आहेत का नाही वाढणार आहेत मला माहितीये का नाही तर दॅट्स व्हाय इट्स अ uncertain future event occurs की वाढतील पण नाही पण वाढतील or a present obligation but present payment is not probably or the amount cannot be measured reliably ki today I am not able to calculate ki at what percentage the my material rate will be increased. So it's not a measured, we are not able to measure the amount for this kind of contingent liability. Contingent assets, a possible assets that arise from past event and whose existence will be confirmed only by the occurrence or non-occurrence of the occurrence of one or more uncertain future event not wholly within the control of entity. Recognition or recognition of provision. Any entity must recognize the provision if and only if a present obligation, legal or constructive, are arisen as a result of past event. The payment is probable more likely than not, and the amount can be estimated reliably. सो थांबा आता आपण एक व्हिडिओ बघूया त्याच्या मोर डिटेल साठी.
creative accounting practice. While companies were involved in so-called big bath provisioning, which practice. Hi, maybe you have heard the term creative accounting. In the past, there were no rules for making provisions, and as a result, provisions belong to the most frequently used creative accounting practice. While companies were involved in so-called
Is video audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
big bath provisioning, which effectively means creating and reversing provisions back and forth from period to period in order to smooth profit. To prevent these practices, the rules related to the reporting of provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets were created in the standard IAS 37, and we will take a closer look at the standard in today's video. I'm Sylvia of IFRSbox.com, and I help people understand and simplify IFRS. I have created the IFRS Kit, a complex IFRS course for you, plus .com. The standard IAS 37 belongs to older standards as it was issued in its current version in 1998 with the effective date of 1st July 1999. The objective of IAS 37 is to set the criteria and rules for measurement and recognition of provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets, plus set the disclosures required for these items. So what is a provision? It is a liability of uncertain timing and amount. Now, let's concentrate on the first part of a definition. What is the liability? A liability is a present obligation of an entity arising from past events, the settlement of which is expected to result in an outflow of economic benefits of an entity. The critical point here is occurrence of past event or obligating event that gives rise to an obligation. Well, if there's no past event, then there's no obligation and there is no liability. Past event might create two types of obligations. The first one is a legal obligation that derives from some contract, legislation, or some other operation of law, for example, a court's decision. The second one is constructive obligation that derives from some entity's actions, such as from established practices or some statement of acceptance of some responsibilities. Well, in fact, there is no difference between provisions created by legal or constructive obligations with regard to accounting treatment. However, if you identify the underlying obligation, whether it's legal or constructive, that may help you to identify when to recognize a provision. So, when should we account for a provision? Well, if all three following conditions are met. Number one, there must be a present obligation, whether legal or constructive, as a result of some past event or obligating event. Number two, the outflow of economic benefits required to settle the obligation must be probable. Well, this is the higher probability of having to pay than not having to pay. In numerical expressions, more than 50%. When probability is less than 50%, in other words, it means that the outflow is just possible, and then the company would probably disclose just the contingent liability or even nothing if probability of outflow is remote. Number three, there must be reliable estimate of outflow of economic benefits that is required to settle the obligation. In extremely rare cases, when no reliable estimate can be made, liability exists, but it cannot be recognized. So when deciding on recognition of provision, we must assess all three conditions. If they are all met, then the provision is recognized, or if not, just not meeting one condition is sufficient, then entity just discloses contingent liability or even nothing if probability of outflow of benefits is remote. Well, here, in order to decide whether to recognize a provision or to disclose a contingent liability or even do nothing, IAS 37 gives us a decision tree, and if you're interested, you can also check that out in our complex course, the IFRS Kit, together with numerical examples. If you find yourself in a situation when you're questioning whether to book a provision or not, well, you should ask yourself one simple question and the answer will guide you. Can you avoid the obligation by some future actions? If yes, then do not recognize any provision because it means that there is no past obligating event. For example, well, when a government is introducing new laws and your company must train the employees to stay updated, well, your company may still decide not to continue in business or not to train the personnel and thus avoid the expenses. But if you really cannot avoid expenses by any future action, then you must make a provision. For example, if you promise warranty repairs when selling some product to your customers, then you must make a provision for expected costs associated with warranty repairs. Let me explain contingencies to you now. Company may face both contingent liabilities and contingent assets. Well, a contingent liability is either possible obligation that arises from past events and its existence will be confirmed by some uncertain future events that are not wholly or fully under company's control. Alternatively, it is also a present obligation that arises from past events, but outflow of economic benefits is just possible not be measured reliably. This is something similar. It is possible asset that arises from past events and whose existence will be confirmed later by occurrence or non-occurrence of some future events out of entity's control. For example, when you are suing somebody else and expect winning the court case with some compensation from other party. In such a case, result of court proceedings is out of your control and this possible compensation would represent contingent asset. Neither contingent liabilities nor contingent assets shall be recognized in financial statements. That means no accounting, okay? But you must disclose their existence, their nature, estimation of financial effects, indication of uncertainties, and some possibility of any reimbursement. And disclosures must be made in the notes to the financial statements. Well, how shall we measure the provisions? Provision should be measured as the best estimate of the expenditure required to settle the present obligation at the end of the reporting period. And this estimate of outcome and financial effect are determined by the judgment of the management of an entity, supplemented by experience of similar transactions, sometimes reports of independent experts. And you should also consider any available evidence. There are two most often ways of measuring provisions. The first one is so-called expected value, and it is used when measurement of provision involves a large population of items. Then the provision is measured as a weighted average of all possible outcomes by their probabilities. The second method is used when a single obligation is being measured, and then the provision would be set as the most likely outcome. When measuring provisions, there are several considerations that you must look at. Risks and uncertainties that surround many events and circumstances, for example, inflation. Also, when you expect to settle your obligation beyond 12 months after the end of the reporting period, then the amount of provision shall be the present value of the expenditure required, and there is some discounting involved. Amount of provision might also include certain adjustments for future events when there is sufficient evidence that these will occur, but be careful. When measuring provisions, gains from expected disposals of assets shall not be taken into account. These gains are included in the income statement at the time specified by another IAS or IFRS standard, for example, IAS 16. How to account for a provision? Well, a provision is recognized as an expense in the income statement in most cases, but sometimes it can be capitalized into the cost of another asset, okay? The credit side goes to a liability, but careful in the current or non-current distinction. Well, when the amount of provision represents its present value due to some discounting, then you would charge an interest on a provision each reporting period to bring it to its future value by the time of its utilization. This is called unwinding the discount, and in this case you debit finance cost in profit or loss, and on the credit side you should increase the amount of a liability. Well, provision is utilized when an entity is obliged to settle in most cases, and a simplified accounting would be just account for the related expenditure by direct debit into provision and credited the cash, suppliers, bank accounts, whatever form the expenditure has. Alternatively, you can treat the expenditure by its usual way, posting it to profit or loss, for example, and subsequently reverse proportionate part of a provision. That's what many entities do, in fact. When you expect some reimbursement from another party, you can recognize the reimbursement asset when it is virtually certain that it will be received, but careful, in the statement of financial position or balance sheet, reimbursement must be shown as a separate asset. So your journal entry would be to debit reimbursement asset, which is some sort of a receivable, and credit expense for provision creation in the profit or loss. Well, it is not credited to some sort of income because IAS 37 permits to present expense related to provision and its reimbursement as a net amount. There are certain specific situations directly addressed by IAS 37 in relation to provisions. The first one is future operating losses. Future operating losses, they just don't meet the definition of a liability because there is no past event, okay? And moreover, you can avoid future operating losses by implementing some measures to prevent them, or by selling a part of operations making a loss, or some other actions. Therefore, you should not create a provision for future operating losses, but when you expect future operating loss, that might mean that your assets are impaired. So you should test your assets for impairment and recognize impairment loss under IAS 36. And you can find a summary of IAS 36 in this channel too. Another specific area addressed by the standard relates to onerous contracts. So what it is unfair contract, in which the unavoidable costs of meeting the obligations of the contract exceed the economic benefits of the contract. In other words, this is a loss contract that cannot be avoided. If a company identifies that a certain contract is onerous, provision must be made in amount of unavoidable costs of fulfilling it. And unavoidable costs can be either net cost of fulfilling the contract, that means cost less some income from the contract, or penalty from non-fulfilling the contract, whichever is lower. Of course, you would also look to any impairment test. The third specific situation addressed by IAS 37 is restructuring. Well, this is the program that is planned and controlled by the management, and it materially changes either the scope of the business or the manner in which that business is conducted. Well, in general, a provision for restructuring must be recognized when two conditions are met. First, a company must have a detailed formal plan that contains the minimum information about the related business, location, employees, expenditures, and sometimes schedule. Also, a valid expectation must have been raised by the company in those affected by the restructuring that the company will carry out the restructuring. And then IAS 37 specify what components or types of expenditures can and cannot form part of a provision. Finally, let me also name a few interpretations that deal with some specific cases of provisions. So first, IFRIC 1, changes in existing decommissioning, restoration, and similar liabilities, deals with the provision for removing the asset and restoring the site after the end of its useful life. And this is very important, for example, in nuclear power plants that are obliged to remove nuclear plants at the end of their useful life. Well, if you'd like to revise the full soft Excel example about this type of provisions, you're welcome to check our IFRS kit. IFRIC 5 writes to interest arising from decommissioning, restoration, and environmental rehabilitation funds is closely related to the first IFRIC, number 1, and it applies when a company contributes to a fund for reimbursement of these expenses. IFRIC 6, liabilities arising from participating in a specific market, waste, electrical, and electronic equipment. Well, this IFRIC specifies when the producers of electrical and similar appliances sold to households are liable for decommissioning of electrical waste. And this applies mainly in the European Union, which obliges all producers to do so. Also, IAS 37 refers to two other interpretations, which is IFRIC 17, distribution of non-cash assets to owners, and IFRIC 21, levies. So this was a short summary of IAS 37. You can find the full and detailed explanations with many numerical examples in our IFRS kit. And if you
कोण आता एक्सप्लेन करेल थोडं what is IFRS told us काय झालं what they are explaining. The next accounting standard is, am I audible? Okay. The next accounting standard is earning per share. So can anybody is able to tell me what is earning per share? क्या होता है earning per share? What is earning per share? Am I audible? मेरा आवाज आ रहा है ना?
Yes, ma'am.
What is earning per share? अभी आप तो सेकेंड सेमेस्टर में हो, राइट? आपने किया होगा ना अर्निंग पर शेयर का रेशियो का प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व. रेशियो का प्रॉब्लम होगा ना आपको अर्निंग पर शेयर रेशियो एनालिसिस में. You have in this financial account management subject, this topic is. क्या अभी तक हुआ नहीं है आपका? Earning per share is a method used to review the performance of an entity. The entity, it means जो भी companies है, those who are issuing the shares into the stock market, earning per share is one of the tool or one of the ratio that measure the company's performance. As the term itself denotes, it simply means determining the profit attributable to each share. हर एक शेयर में कितना प्रॉफिट आ रहा है. इफ यू आर परचेसिंग 20 shares, 30 shares, 100 shares, 1000 shares, if you are investing your money in this into the company by purchasing the shares, so what is the return return the company gives you in form of earning per share, कि कितना आपको per share का earning मिलेगा. Such information is required to understand the return on investment for the shareholders and prospective investor. See, those who are already investing their money into that company, so it is show lightning ki whether their investment, whether the return on their investment is good or bad or prospective. They attract these ratio also attract, or this earning per share amount also attract the prospective investors. Objective of the standard, the objective of the standard is to provide a common parameter for the reviewing the performance of the entities as compared the same. Also, the computation can be used for reviewing the performance of the entity between the different period. कि last year 6 months पहले कितना था, last year कितना था, 2 years पहले कितना था, या 5 years का performance कैसे रहा है earning per share का. This will helps you to measure the performance. Even though the earning per share data have even though the earning per share data have the limitation because of the different accounting policy that may be used for determining the earnings, constantly determining the denominator enhance the financial reporting. Sometimes what happened, for the accounting policies, every company using different types of accounting policy for the earning per share. So to bring a uniformity in the earning per share, this standard is helps. The focus of the standard is on the denominator of the earnings per share calculation. How we calculate the earning per share. Scope of the standard. This standard require that if any entity computes the earning per share, then it must calculate and disclose the same as per this standard. Further, this standard requires that if any entity present both consolidated financial statement and a separate financial statement as per the standard, then it must present the earning per share in the both statements separately. So we have to show the separately for the consolidated and for separate. The standard prescribes two methods for measurement of earning per share: basic earning per share and diluted earning per share. So what is the basic earning per share? Basic earning per share will be calculated by dividing the profit or loss attributable to ordinary equity holders for the present equity by the weighted average numbers of ordinary shares outstanding for the period will be calculated there. They are providing the formula. If you are calculating basic earning per share, what should be included in the formula and not. The computation enables in understanding the earning attributable to each ordinary share. कि किती earning तुम्हाला एका share साठी आलेला आहे. Detailed formula, क्या formula है इसका earning per share का basic का profit or loss attributable to ordinary equity shareholders at a present entity. जो भी profit है after issuing the preference dividend to the preference shareholders, and whatever amount is remaining with the company is a pure profit to available for the equity shareholders. Then less after tax preference dividend, कि the preference dividend अगर कोई है तो वो less करते हैं, then divided by a weighted average of ordinary share. कि how much number of share you have, say 1,000, 10,000, 2,000, like that. Then see the one example for that. A company has 10,000 ordinary share in issue throughout the 2000 something 2001, 2, 3 जो भी होगा वो. The company earns the profit after tax 10,000. Okay, calculate the basic earning per ordinary share. The formula says that the profit for the year or loss for the year. See, they are providing the 1,000 as 1 lakh. We are considering that 1 lakh less fixed preference dividend. There is no preference shares in the problem, so there is no preference dividend. Less share of profit belonging participating preference shareholders, वो भी नहीं है. Then earning attributable to ordinary shareholders, कि कितना amount उसको बचा है, 1 lakh rupees. So formula is earning belonging to ordinary shareholders divided by number of ordinary share. How much shares they are issuing? 10,000. So 1 lakh divided by 10,000, our earning is 10 rupees per ordinary share. If I invested money into a If company have 10,000 shares, if they are issuing 10,000 shares, the earning from the company side is rupees 10 per share to its shareholders. Then see, if they are giving a preference shareholders, what is the difference between the calculation? Then see example, a company has 10,000 ordinary shares and 10,000 non-cumulative or redeemable 10% preference shares in company has 10,000 ordinary shares and 10,000 non-cumulative, non-redeemable 10% C2 preference shares in issue through 2000 जे काही year असेल ते. Company earns the profit after tax 1 lakh. The company declared the full 2021 घेऊयात आपण dividends owing the preference shareholders. See, company is declaring the dividend also. Same formula we are applying here. Profit for the year is 1 lakh less fixed preference dividend. How much preference shares they have? How much preference shares they have? 10,000 non-redeemable 10%. C2 preference shares. C2 is the name of that preference shares. That is, they are providing 10% dividend on preference share. So 10,000 into 10%, 10% into C2. Okay, C2 is the category. So 2,000 आला त्याचा. Then ते less केलं तर 98,000 and same formula we are using. 98,000 divided by 10,000. So earning per ordinary share is 9.8 per share. If the company having both the equity shares or preference shares, then the earning per share there is a possibility की ते less होऊ शकतं. Next type is diluted earning per share. Diluted means to make a thinner or a less concentrated. With respect to the earning per share, dilution word occurs if the same earning have to be shared amongst more shareholders than are currently in the existence. Many entities that at year end have the potential shares outstanding, which if the converted into shares would dilute the earnings per share. Dilute earning per share shows the lowest earning per share possible, assuming that these potential ordinary shares are created. It logically follows that diluted earning per share can never be higher than the basic earning per share. Diluted means what? There are if they have a what we can say bucket of number of shares, that is की 5% आहेत 10% आहेत किंवा प्रेफरन्स मध्ये पण 2-3 प्रकार आहेत, डिबेंचर होल्डर्स आहेत. सो देअर अर्निंग्स इज डायल्युटेड की सगळ्यांना देऊन 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 अगदी स्मॉल पार्ट उरतो for paying a dividend, that is diluted earning per share. See the basic example की C चे 5 lakhs आहेत, earnings त्याची 5 lakhs आहे. There were no components of the other comprehensive income. Ordinary number of shares 1,20,000. 3 lakhs options were in issued at 31st December 2015. Guaranteed to the director for the no value. Required to calculate the basic and diluted earning per share for the year ended 31st December. See, basic earnings ला आता dividend त्यांनी issue केलेला नाहीये आणि average number of share available आहेत 1,20,000. So if I am dividing, the earning per share is 0.41, and if I am diluting, so I have to consider these 3 lakh shares also and these 5 lakhs also. So diluted earnings 5 lakhs plus 1,20,000 plus that 3 lakhs. So diluted earning kiti आलं 0.033%. So it shows that if we are considering diluted earning per share method, your earning per share is always less than basic earning per share. There is some convertible instrument in this case. Convertible debentures astat, convertible preference shares. There is an option to you can convert your equity shareholders into debenture and preference shares. And there are some definition. There are some definition under this accounting standard. Anti-dilution is an increase in earning per share or a reduction in loss per share resulting from the assumption that convertible instruments are converted, that options or warrants are exercised, or that ordinary shares are issued upon the satisfaction of specific condition. That anti-dilution is earning per share or a reduction in loss per share resulting from the assumption that convertible instrument is if you are converting some instrument, then your dilution earning per share is less. A contingent share agreement. It is an agreement to issue the share is depend on the satisfaction of specified condition. The next definition is contingently issuable ordinary shares. Are the ordinary shares issued for title or no cash or other consideration upon the satisfaction of specific condition in the contingent share agreement. की आम्ही तुमचे 5 शेअर घेतो तुमच्या 2 शेअर्सच्या बदल्यात आम्ही तुम्हाला 5 शेअर देतो. We are giving you some 500 shares of our company, you give 200 shares of your company, like that. की त्यांच्यामध्ये काहीतरी नॉन कॅश अग्रीमेंट झालेला असतो for the shares, that is contingently issuable ordinary shares. Then dilution, it's a reduction in the earning per share. Now already we know that dilution is the reduction of earning per share or increase in loss per share. Automatically the result is increasing loss per share resulting from the assumption that the convertible instrument are converted. Same, if the instrument is able to convert, then we should convert, and that options are warrants exercise or that ordinary shares are issued upon the satisfaction of specified condition. Then options and warrants. So what is options and warrants and are their equivalents? Are the financial instrument that gives the holder the right to purchase the ordinary shares. Okay, then an ordinary shares. What is an ordinary shares? It is an equity instrument. It is an equity instrument options and warrants are their equivalents and the financial instrument that gives the rights to the holders. Okay, ordinary share is an equity instrument that is subordinate to all other class of equity instrument. Potentially ordinary share is the financial instrument or other contract that may entitle its holder to ordinary shares. Put option on ordinary shares are contracts that gives the holder the right to sell the ordinary share at a specific price for a given period. In put option, you can sell the you have a right to sell your shares. How are the earning per share to be presented? And in the entity shall present basic and diluted earning per share with the equal prominence for all periods. If you are using the basic diluted basic earning per share method, you have to show that method you have to follow that method continually. If you are having using a diluted earning per share method, it will follow for the subsequent period. The entity shall present the basic and diluted earning share even if it is negative. Disclosure requirement, how we disclose the earning per share in the our financial statement is any entity shall disclose the following: the amount used as the numerator in the calculating basic and diluted earning per share and a recognition to the profit or loss. The weighted average number of ordinary share used as a denominator in the calculating. Basically, they interested. This standard is interested in the number of shares. Which number of share you are dividing in the denominator. की कसे तुम्ही ते denominator साठी use करताय. That is very important disclosure in this accounting standard. Instrument including that could potentially diluted basic earning per share in the future, but were not included in the calculation of diluted earning per share because they are anti-dilutive for the periods presented. Descriptions of ordinary shares transactions or potential ordinary share transactions. We have to describe this transaction is for the ordinary shares and that is for the potential ordinary shares. The next accounting standard is Indian Accounting Standard 108, that is operating segment. And this is the last accounting standard in this topic. For that, I have another video for you. See, basically the operating segment is what area the standard is and this core principle, the entity shall disclose the information information to enable user for its financial statement to evaluate the nature and financial effects of the business activities in which it's engaged and the economic environment in which it's operate. Basically, this standard is operating segment, which this standard is for the operating industries. They are the industries which are operating in a different geographical area. Their plants in right कि ते उनका प्लांट रहता है किधर, वो गैस का नेचुरल गैस का प्लांट रहता है या फिर जो स्पेसिफिक ज्योग्राफिकल एरिया में कैसे ऑपरेटिंग होता है उनका, और वो डिफरेंशिएट करना है हमें लोगों को समझाने के लिए कि दिस इज द ऑपरेशनल सेगमेंट इन अवर इंडस्ट्री, कि ये ऑपरेशनल सेगमेंट है एंड दिस इज नॉन ऑपरेशनल सेगमेंट. The scope. This accounting standard shall apply to the company to which the Indian Accounting Standard notify under the Companies Act. Companies Act के अंदर जो भी companies है, this standard is applicable to all. If an entity that is not required to apply this accounting standard choose to disclose the information about the segment that does not comply with this Indian Accounting Standard, it shall not describe the information as a segment information. Then if the financial report contain both the consolidated financial statement of a present, that is with the scope of this accounting standard, as well as the parents separate financial statement segment information is required only in the consolidated financial statement. कि अगर वो main branch है और parent company है तो we have to show in a both types of accounting statement. Then we have a very short video for this. Let's see where is the video.
IFRS world. I am Chandni Gupta and I help you as 108, that is on operating segments. The objective of this index is to require the disclosure of information that enables the users of financial statements to evaluate the nature and financial effects of the types of business activities in which an entity engages and the economic environment in which it operates. This particular standard is applicable to all the companies that are required to comply with Ind AS. And these companies disclose this information separately as segment information. However, where an entity that is not required to comply with Ind AS but it chooses to disclose this information about segments that is not in accordance with Ind AS, that particular entity will not describe the information as segment information. Further, where an entity presents consolidated financial statements as well as its separate financial statements, the segment information is required only in the consolidated financial statements. Now, let's understand what is an operating segment. So, it is a component of an entity that engages in business activities from which it may earn revenues and incur expenses. So, basically, earning actual revenues and incurring actual expenses is not a prerequisite, but if the particular component has a prospect of earning revenues and incurring expenses, then also it will be considered. For example, startup operations. Startup operations may be operating segments even before earning revenues. And these revenues and expenses also include any intergroup transactions. So the first condition is that that particular component engages in business activities from which it may earn revenues and incur expenses. Second is the component's operating results are reviewed regularly by the organization's chief operating decision maker. In short, CODM. CODM is not a particular person, but it is a function. It is a function that takes decisions regarding resource allocations and performance assessments of the operating segments of an entity. So the second condition is that the component's operating results are reviewed regularly by the organization's chief operating decision maker, that is CODM, to make decisions regarding resource allocation and performance assessment. Third condition is that the component's financial information should be available. So, in short, there are three conditions when a component will qualify as an operating segment. Number one is it engages in business activities from which it may earn revenues and incur expenses. Number second, that its operating results are regularly reviewed by CODM. Number third is that its financial information is available. Now that we understand the meaning of operating segment and what is a chief operating decision maker, so it is a function that allocates the resources and assesses the performance of the operating segments of an entity. So generally, CEO and COO are considered as CODM, but it may also be a group of executive directors. Now let's understand the aggregation criteria. So any two or more operating segments may be aggregated into a single operating segment only if they have similar economic characteristics and they're similar in each of the following respects. So all of these below five criteria should be similar. Number one is the nature of the products and services should be similar. Then the nature of the production processes should be similar. Then the type and the class of customer for their products or services should be similar. Then the methods used to distribute their products or provide their services should be similar. And the nature of regulatory environment should also be similar. If these five criteria are similar and they have similar economic characteristics, then two or more operating segments may be aggregated into one single operating segment. Now that we understand what is an operating segment and when they can be aggregated, let's understand what are the reportable segments out of those operating segments. So reportable segments are basically those operating segments that qualify the quantitative thresholds. Now, what are the quantitative thresholds? So there are three quantitative criteria that are specified in this standard, and if an operating segment qualifies any of these three, it shall be qualified as a reportable segment and it will be reported separately. The first criteria is that the reported revenue The external plus internal should be 10% or more of the combined revenue of all the operating segments. Internal plus external. Second criteria is that the reported profit or loss should be 10% or more of the greater of combined profit of all operating segments that did not report a loss, or the combined loss of all reporting segments that reported a loss. And the third criteria is that the total of assets should be 10% or more of the combined assets of all operating segments. Let's understand these quantitative thresholds with the help of an example. Suppose there are four segments, segment A, B, C, and D, and these are the reported profit or loss figures, revenue, and asset. Now let's check all these three criteria one by one. First of all, the profit or loss condition, which was that the reported profit or loss of the segment should be 10% or more of the greater of combined profit of all operating segments that did not report a loss, which in this case is 70,000, and the combined loss of all operating segments that reported a loss, which is 36,000 in this case. Now we need to compare the 10% of the greater of these two. That is the 70,000, which is the total profit, the greater of total profit and total loss. The 10% of this total profit, which comes out as 7,000, will be compared with the profit and loss figures of A, B, C, and D segments. We need to see the profit and loss figures in absolute A, even though there is a loss of 30,000, we need to see it as an absolute figure. That means there is no negative or positive amount. All the numbers should be seen in positive manner. So, in any case, 30,000 is a bigger amount than 7,000. Hence, segment A qualifies the profit or loss condition. So does segment B. But in case of segment C, there is a loss of 6,000, which is anyway lesser than 7,000. Hence, segment C does not qualify this condition. Now, segment D also reports 50,000 of profits. Hence, segment D also qualifies for this condition. Second condition is the stand. The total assets of the entity is 90,000. The 10% of it comes out as 9,000. Now, the segments that reported total assets equal to or more than 9,000 will be considered as qualifying this particular condition. As you can see, all the segments have reported assets greater than 9,000. Hence, all the segments meet this condition. Third condition is the revenue condition. The total revenue of all the segments is 1,60,000, the 10% of which comes out at 16,000. Now we need to compare 16,000 with the revenues reported by all the segments. As you can see, segment A has reported a revenue of 10,000, which is lesser than 16,000. Hence, segment A does not qualify for this condition. Segment B has reported a revenue of 70,000, which in this case will qualify for the revenue condition. Segment C has reported a revenue of 20,000. Hence, segment C also qualifies for this condition. And segment D has reported a revenue of 60,000. Hence, segment D also meets this condition. Therefore, we can see that all the segments meet at least one of these three conditions. Therefore, all the segments will be considered as the reportable segment. Now, there are certain important points to be noted. Number one is that the total external revenue reported by these operating segments should be at least 75% of the total revenue of the entity. If that does not happen, then the entity will identify additional operating segments until the total external revenue is at least 75% of the total revenue of the entity. Another point is that the information about other business activities and operating segments that have not been identified as reportable segments shall be combined and shall be disclosed in an all other segments category. Now let's understand the disclosure requirements. So there are three major
I think we should stop here. The disclosure part we covered in the next lecture. You have another lecture?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think we stop here. The disclosure part and the next topic we to start in the next lecture. Okay, so you can leave meeting. Have a nice time.